Carly, we're excited to have you here and to meet you virtually.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we were chatting a little bit, and I know before we started recording, I know you're based in Jacksonville, but could you share a little bit with our listeners about yourself, both personally and professionally, so they can get to know you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up about an hour and a half south of here in New Smyrna Beach, and loved it. But later in life, ended up in Jacksonville area, a little bit closer to St. Augustine, where I met my husband, and we decided to stay and raise our family here. So we have three kids, three dogs. I think we're at like 9 or 10 chickens.
Oh my
Our own little.
God.
Our own tiny little homestead here. So outside of work, we spend a lot of time outdoors, whether it's at the beach or hiking or keeping up with all of our kids' sports, which is a never-ending task. So that's always fun. Um, Professionally, I went to school as an art history major, which is really interesting, kind of taking that leap into logistics. But it gave me a lens for creative problem solving and storytelling, which, I like to carry into sales and strategy today. But I spent over 8 years at Crowley Maritime, which is headquartered here. And I've worked in their land transportation and ocean services. And so that gave me a really solid foundation in logistics as a whole before jumping into Transfix, which was more focused on the truck brokerage side.
All right, and Carly, I'd say more often than not, we talk to people that say they kind of fell into supply chain. But can you talk to us about did you have an aha moment? A lot of people start in finance, which is also a theme that we hear. But talk about your path and how you knew supply chain was for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't know initially. It was something where I had graduated, and at the time the economy wasn't super strong, so, there wasn't a lot of opportunity in arts or education. And so I needed to kind of look into a career where there was a bit more opportunity, and that's how I had found myself at Crowley. And so I would say early in my career, when I tell you I knew nothing about logistics, it was an inside sales role, so you could be super green going into it. Um, After I had learned everything that I had over time, I guess I kind of had that aha moment where I realized it's one of the few industries that touches everything. And it's the backbone of how the
Hmm.
world runs. Even seeing really small changes in pricing or process or technology, how those tiny little things could have a ripple effect across an entire business was really interesting for me. And again, like I came from a very different world, and so when I got thrown into logistics, it was super exciting to see how the world actually operates, which I was really naive to prior.
We hear that quite a bit where you're almost surprised, but it's also exciting to see the ripple effect of supply chain because it does. It's just like you said, like I love how you said it's the backbone of how things like move and get done across the world. And I think when you have that moment, that light bulb moment, you're like, am I going to be a part of this? It is. It's exciting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
So
I love it.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are at the bus stop or maybe on the sidelines of one of your kids' games, and somebody asks you, what do you do? How do you explain to someone you've never met, like what your day looks like?
Yeah, I'll be really honest, when they first ask, I just tell them I'm in logistics.
Okay.
But, because it kind of depends on where people stand within it. Fortunately, Jacksonville is a pretty strong logistics hub. There's a number of transportation companies. We have a port here, so a lot of people know a little bit more about it, so I can get into it a little bit deeper. So today I tell people I help freight brokers and logistics companies make smarter decisions, faster pricing decisions using technology. Um, I get into a little bit about AI, kind of depending on what the appetite is for that. But my role here at Transfix is really about connecting sales, marketing, and customer success to help our customers adopt our AI powered tools that can help make their jobs a little bit easier. And in the end, help their businesses go stronger and help support the strategies that they're trying to implement.
And Carly, so with that, do you find, to your point, because I think if I said that to people here, they'd be like, "What?" But do you see a lot more people in the industry as you are out and about because it's such a big, like, you know, your big hub there?
Yeah, I mean, there really are. It's a lot easier to explain, because a lot of people do work in supply chain in some sort, I would say, in Jacksonville. There's a lot of other large companies that are headquartered here. But I do think that across any industry, AI is having an impact. And so when you say AI, that kind of piques a
Yeah.
bit of interest and they're kind of like, oh, how are you deploying it? What does that look like? If they're in the logistics space, it's also super interesting, because it's not something that's AI for cost models, isn't in everybody's business. Some of the
Yeah.
large, super large brokerages have worked for years and invested in it, but many of the other ones haven't. And so it does
Mm.
spark a good conversation a bit deeper about what do we do? Who do we benefit? Why does it work? And kind of how it's unique.
And you did talk about this, and so just hearing you talk now, so you started off in art history. So talk to us about how you chose that, and then now you're vice president of revenue at a tech-focused logistics company. So how it feels not related, but how has that helped you as you think about problem solving and strategy in supply chain?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, I got into it ironically enough because I didn't like I went to college. I wasn't really sure. I thought maybe I'd wanted to go into education. And then I took some, the gen ed classes and I ironically, I was like nothing to do with math, nothing to do with numbers. It I don't want to do anything with it. And so and then I took an art history class and I was like, oh, this is really fascinating. I just naturally took to it and enjoyed it. Um, so that is, I understand the irony in all of it as I live in spreadsheets and do like
As you lead
forecast
a high-tech
projections.
AI.
As I talk about cost models and data modeling and, use words like heuristics, I get it. But it, it's been really interesting. I think I've been able to look at things as for someone who studied art in college, I've been able to look at things from multiple perspectives, and not be afraid of ambiguity. I've always really like thrived in
Mm.
environments with ambiguity, which is why I think I've done well at Transfix over the years. It's got to be fast paced. There's really, and you've got to really be able to like be nimble and kind of look at the big picture and have like alternate opinions in the way it looks. And so, it's not that different in art. There's rarely one right interpretation,
Mhm.
and in logistics, there's rarely one right answer or one right solution. You kind of have to weigh all the options, the context, and the risk. I think that mindset helps me approach things that I do today, like pricing strategy, sales conversations, and even internally, since I've taken over marketing, it's like leading with creativity. So while not directly related, I do think like, the core concepts have helped in, interpretation and looking things at a different perspective, at a different lens, have helped me in where I am today with Transfix.
Such an interesting background, but also I'm loving these parallels because oftentimes, if you come with, I don't know, a finance or an engineering degree, it's all about the numbers and there is only one right answer. And
Very black
so,
and white.
yeah, you almost have to learn to get comfortable in the ambiguity and learn to think like scenario planning and things like this. And you sort of came with that learning mindset. I love that.
Thanks.
Did
Okay,
you
I want to
find
talk
it?
a little bit.
I,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
have one follow up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
you
yeah.
find it hard with the art history major to break in? That people were kind of like not making the connection?
Um, Not necessarily. Like I said, when I first came in, and this is credit to Crowley and the management that I had there, they hired me knowing that I think it was, if I'm being completely honest, a bit of a personality hire. Like they were looking for somebody that would like smile and dial and make a lot of calls. It was an inside sales role. Um, and so
Smile and dial.
they
That's a good
weren't
one.
yeah, they weren't really, like, leaning on my logistics expertise. They just wanted somebody who wasn't afraid to get in front of customers and, like, get people on the phone, and teach people about Crowley at the time and kind of focus on a subset of customers that maybe they hadn't focused on previously, which is that SMB kind of space. And so I don't think that, I think, like I said, it was more personality. I don't think they were leaning on me for any sort of logistics expertise. Fortunately, I had a really great manager when I got in there, and we did a lot of, there was a group of us that were inside sales that were kind of all hired around the same time. And so we all kind of went through training. I think one maybe had a marketing background. I can't recall the others, like what their backgrounds were, but we were all fresh out of college and nobody with a specific logistics degree. Um, so we were all kind of thrown into the fire and learned together.
It's a good lesson though, because sometimes as you're looking at candidates, the fit and whether or not they have the learning agility might be more
Yeah,
important than if they have like on paper the credentials. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
okay, so Transfix.
Yeah.
As we're doing some research on it, it says their mission is to make pricing a process that people can love. I kind of love that that is like the mission because that feels like a big one to get people to love that process. For our listeners who might be frustrated, maybe with their current methods, what's like a common, maybe old school practice that you see people doing today that where AI or new tech could offer a different solution?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is, especially in freight brokerages, when you get the opportunity to price an RFP or to price a new shipper, it's very common to have like a centralized pricing person, maybe at headquarters or in a certain place, and then they kind of duplicate all the spreadsheets and they send it out maybe to different offices or to different stakeholders within there. And when they do that, they may be looking at different data sets. They could be like leading with emotion based on maybe what they
Mm,
think they could actually cover the load for, what they think their cost is when you're managing an RFP like that, which is I've done it when I've done it before on on different sides of the business. The data is asynchronous, right? And so not everyone's looking at the same data set. They're not all kind of making decisions based on the same information. So I think like the first solution is like, and where Transfix really comes in is it's a single platform to which everybody has access. It's a
mm,
multi-tenant platform. It's for everybody who touches the life cycle of a customer, whether that's on sales, account management, carrier side, pricing. And when you're making these decisions, we're creating a custom cost model for short-term and long-term buying. And so everybody can be in there looking at the same data set in the same platform, making decisions on what's best for the company or what's best for the lane or what's best for the customer. And so that's kind of like the first example that I think of right off the bat where AI can do the work. It's based off of your cost, it's based off of your behaviors. You decide as a company with all the same data sets as to whether or not you think you will buy at that cost and then can estimate your margin, or you want to try to maybe get more aggressive or lean in on the behaviors that help you buy better to help you be more competitive in an RFP.
I love it because it does. We talk a lot about when we're doing these digital transformations,
Yeah.
um, almost like democratizing the data, so like everybody
Yeah.
has
Hmm.
access to it. But I think the power in it is not just that they have access to it, but like we're on the same page.
Mhm.
And so just like you said, because you have some folks that are like, my gut's telling me I think I could do this. And it's like, I got a number over here that says this. And this it does. It makes sure that we're all looking at least in the same book, even. Sometimes it wasn't even
Yeah.
the same
Hmm.
page, it wasn't even the same book before always.
Oh no, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think it's okay if you have somebody who kind of leads a bit more with emotion to say,
Mm,
"Actually, I think I can beat that rate." That's totally fine, but you have to have the data set to say, "Okay, here, let's level set. Like, here's where we've been. Here's what you'd have to beat if we went at this, and like, here's the volume at which you'd have to beat it consistently. What's the plan behind that?" You want to
yeah.
encourage, right, that emotional side to the
Yeah.
humans wanting to be more competitive and wanting to be better, but you also want parameters in which they have to operate so that you
Realism within
understand.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you wanna understand what the risk is if it doesn't come to fruition, and then what the upside is if it
Yeah.
does.
Okay, Carly, you talked about this a little bit, but the freight market is notoriously volatile. How do Transfix's AI powered pricing cost models help brokers and 3PLs navigate this volatility? And like you talked about, make more informed decisions in real time.
Yeah, I mean, this eliminates the guesswork. With the cost models, a broker can take their historical buying data, market signals, they can take their behaviors, their benchmarks, and they generate a clear prediction of what the carrier could actually charge them, of what they usually what their cost is, what their buying rate is, because that's what matters when you're looking at your bottom line, right? Like when you're looking at your margins and you're looking at your profitability, you could tell the customer anything you want, right? Like they're going to hold you to that rate, but how do you buy against that? As well as how do you buy against the market? So it, it's it's faster, it's more accurate, and it helps kind of remove what we talked about earlier, like that late night spreadsheet stress about everyone kind of being in different spreadsheets and knowing who's accurate and who's not. Um, and also, like when you have an understanding of where there's volatility, where there's cyclicality, and how you usually perform in those environments, it's going to help you plan ahead of that to make smarter decisions, right? Like you're not going into it blind. You know
Mm-hmm.
that this is where you're going to be red or this is where you're going to see a spike in volume. Let's formulate a plan now across the different stakeholders internally and align on how do we either mitigate that risk or, turn a red lane to green.
And Carly, do you find, not saying that I've done this or seen people, but we can have a lot of data,
Mhm.
but really, it's really hard to either let go of what we really believe the narrative should be, or just uh, making all the numbers work to our reality in certain companies. So how do you advise when there are those like people that have been somewhere for a long time, have the experience, question the models, and like, can you talk us
Yeah.
through that? I just think that's some of the data
Yeah.
can always be there. We can always cut it and find a way to make our
I
narrative
think
work for us.
yeah, I think you're making a case for change management in a nutshell, right? Like
Yeah.
change is inherently difficult, especially for logistics companies. And one of the kind of best and worst things about some of these logistics companies, you have somebody who has done the pricing process for 20 years. They're
Mm-hmm.
extremely skilled and extremely knowledgeable, but they've done it the same way for 20 years. I think we kind of have to find a balance between AI is bad and will replace you, and
Mm.
AI is good and will enhance the way you perform. And so from a sales perspective, I often, if we're getting to a point where we have somebody who's like struggling with change, there needs to be more done internally to support that because I could sell you on this product reluctantly, but then onboarding and adoption will not be
Mm.
strong across the board. Like you need to kind of have that
Mm-hmm.
overall. So I think that, change management is really key and kind of just understanding how to leverage things like AI and leverage these tools like data in the UI itself that we have. We really try to simplify it. We're not making decisions for you. We're giving you very easy graphs, like kind of bar graphs. We're showing you which way the market's going, where you're buying against it. So that it's that like motto, like keep it simple, stupid. Like don't overcomplicate the way things are going. Like don't waver into opinions. You're gonna be worse off wavering between 2 different directions instead of like we around here at Transfix, we commit and execute, we fail fast. If it doesn't work, we fix it. That's kind of the thing. Like, let's just go this way. If we fail fast, let's quickly recover and we'll move from there.
So, okay, this kind of leads to the next question. Then I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership experiences. So, coming from, you were at Crowley for eight
Yeah.
years, and it is a more traditional, like logistics company. And
Mhm.
now, as you're talking about Transfix, it feels maybe fast paced. It feels like entrepreneurial in the sense of like fail fast and then go next. How did that experience from Crowley, though, prepare you for this? But also, what have you maybe learned like coming into Transfix? You're like, gosh, I wish I had applied that maybe in the more traditional role. And
Yeah,
I
I
want to
mean,
know
I
like
wish there
what's the
was a
best of each. Yeah.
yeah, I just to address that last one, I wish there was a lot of stuff that I learned at Transfix I could have applied at
Mm,
Crowley. I was fresh out of college. I was younger. There was just a lot as like somebody was learning in their career that I've learned now that I wish I
yeah.
could have taken back. Who knows? Like maybe I would have, never left Transfix if I had applied those, kind of learnings earlier, but everything has worked out. Before, like I said, before Transfix, I'd spent close to 8 years at Crowley, and it is a more traditional logistics company, or it was then. It's definitely made, I have friends
Hmm.
there, and it's made leaps and bounds, and it's kind of diversified itself. But it really gave me a strong foundation in land and ocean transportation. And it showed me the challenges that come with leading teams through change in such a large organization.
Mm.
When I was there, they had acquired another steamship line. They had acquired a customs brokerage, and I had witnessed kind of all that struggle with change management. And not that they didn't do it well, just like the internal stakeholders and who needed
Yeah.
to be brought in and what that looked like. And so I think that was really helpful. At Transfix, the pivot from brokerage to SaaS was not just a business model shift, it was a complete identity shift. When
Wow.
you're yeah, when you're asking people to redefine what they do, how they show up for customers, and in some cases, the entire purpose of their role, empathy and honesty become a non-negotiable.
Mm.
And for a lot of employees and a lot of us, like, I mean, my team, I lost my entire team had divested over. And so a lot of us were working with new people and we're working in different roles. And so, and listen, I've never worked in a SaaS company ever. I'd never sold SaaS prior to this transition. So I had learned as a leader in this transition that it isn't about having all the answers. It's about being transparent about what you know, what you don't know, which, like I said,
Yeah.
I hadn't done this. So that was a lot for me. And how you're going to figure it out together, especially with a smaller, fast moving team. That kind of honesty builds trust. People are far more willing to rally around a tough pivot when they believe that their leader is leveling with them. That's
Mm.
what my CEO did with me, and it was very easy. It was that like kind of that like shadow of a leader. It was very easy for me to cast that same shadow onto my team as my CEO did with me. So for me, it's leading with empathy, and empathy means acknowledging the human side of things, how it feels for someone to shift their job focus and adopt a new process or step into a different way of measuring success. And then also transparency means not sugarcoating what's hard. Both ba-
Yeah.
balancing both has been critical in guiding Transfix through this transformation. I think for me, it's been a year kind of since we did the full pivot and we've come to market with tools and we've sold them and we've got marketing materials and we've had all this kind of change. It's one of the things I'm most proudest of. A
Mm.
lot of our team has stayed through the ups and the downs because they trust the leadership and the vision because we've built it together. And that's really important. And that trust, which, like I said, we've built on empathy, and honesty, and consistency. That's what keeps people aligned and motivated, even when things are constantly shifting. And we say, fail fast so we can figure it
Yeah.
out and then move forward.
Thank you for, because I was going to ask that question, like how many people came along the journey? Because that's a big change, and
Mhm.
how many
Yeah.
people did you lose? And I think that is something you should be super proud of. Because my initial thought was going to be people were just going to tag out and say, "This is not what I signed up for," and that's awesome to hear that people came along that with you guys and made it to the other side. So I think that is a testament to your leadership and the leadership of the company to have that transparency and real empathy. So I think that's amazing. So that was going to be
Y-
my follow up question to you. So
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that it's it's a testament to the people too. I mean, we were asking them to do something that was really big, right? We were saying this part of the business was divested off, which was really hard because we lost a lot of really great employees, but they were going to a good
Mm.
place, right? Like NFI is a
Hmm.
great company. They had stable jobs. It's not like we were throwing them, into a fire. But then I think it was really risky for those who stayed, right? Like we were like, we're gonna figure this out as we go. Hey, for this first week, like let's talk. Let's talk about where you see this company, what we're visioning. Is this something you like? Is this something you're looking forward to? So there were a lot of, some people were easily convinced and others it took a couple
Yeah.
conversations. But my biggest thing was like, I will never lie to you. I will be as honest as I can about what we're doing, where we're going, and what I need for you and why I chose you to be a part of this journey.
And I think that people are almost afraid to do it because they're afraid of maybe the reaction, but you just build so much trust. And so then when you need something or something's going great, there's just this belief in you and the team because it's like if she's willing to be honest with me about the hard stuff, like then I'm gonna believe her when she's
Mhm.
telling me about the good stuff too. Because that's the hardest part I think when you're going through change is like getting through that dip and seeing like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If people haven't really been honest with you about that dip, that can be hard to stick with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think, I do hear, I talk about it a little bit, is our employees know before we know. So if we're not, like, they see it, right? Like the
Yeah.
things, so it's like if we sit there and act detached from the reality, they're going to be more
Mm,
concerned about that than the problem. So I always tell people, I'm like, they see it, they get it. Or like the whole adage around like your team knows what you need to work on, like more than you do. Like they see it
Yeah.
all the time. And so it's if you can like admit it and talk about it or just act like I'm awesome and I have nothing to work on. So I mean, I think that's to your point is like, hey, this is going to be hard because they probably knew that, and getting that confirmation is probably just like, okay, like she's not up here in the clouds like thinking this is going to be
mhm.
easy for us.
And it also creates, an environment where your team can bring those things to you, right? When they say
Mm-hmm.
this isn't
Yeah.
working because you're like, "Oh, yeah, it's not. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's figure this out." 'Cause
Yeah.
I had one the other day where one of my head of implementation was like, "Okay, here's like our top 3 issues we have with onboarding." And I was like, "Oh, I thought 2 of these were resolved. Like, thanks for bringing this to my attention. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay, like, what's the solve here? What do we think? Where's our head at on these?" So, had he not felt comfortable enough to bring that, then that could have,
Yeah.
resulted in lost revenue from, poor onboardings.
So, kind of hard pivot, soft pivot. I don't know. You've had roles in business development, sales, customer success. How do you see the relationship across those functions, and why has it been important as you think about successful SaaS company and have those working in harmony? Because I think we've all seen it in supply chain and other like we can work in our silos, and it's really challenging. So as you think about all of your roles, like how do you think that connection isn't? Can you talk through the importance of that?
Yeah, I think what you said, as we all see them in silos, I think it's really important to acknowledge that sales, marketing, customer success aren't separate silos. They are and should be a continuous feedback loop. Sales sets expectations, marketing's telling the story, and customer success ensures the delivery. If they aren't aligned and constantly in communication with each other, the customer feels it, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
heavy impact, right? And so in SaaS, harmony here is the difference between like growth and churn. And when you're an early company like we are, churn is not a word you want to hear. It's a non-negotiable. Like we don't even mention it. It's not even on the table. Um, so it wasn't until the last few years that I really started to dig into that marketing engine side of things because prior to I'd really been focused on the sales and customer success side. Um, but it wasn't until I got into it that I really saw how important um, demand gen and storytelling and like my personal favorite, which I've taken on as my kind of marketing philosophy is the bow tie method. Just how critical brand recognition in the sales cycle and growing exist, existing customers, how critical they are to each of those parts. Like everybody owns part of it, but they're not, they don't work individually. So I've seen it, I'll say it, like, an old Transfix, it wasn't incorporated. There were times when I was here, like, with sales and marketing were 2 very different pieces. And so learning how to incorporate them all has been one of my favorite parts of Transfix's transition, kind of, like, taking on that bit more of responsibility and learning each side of it and kind of helping them all talk and be
Yeah.
friends.
No, I do. I think you become a broader business leader, right? And you can see the
Yeah.
opportunities like, hey, I think supply chain could help you out with that. Or, hey, supply chain, there might be a surge of demand coming through because they're about to go do something amazing over here in sales or brand. Yeah, no, I think when you can start, I think the first step is like, can you connect across the supply chain? But honestly, beyond that, it's all the way through across all the functions. Yeah. And it takes some time to get there, I think.
It does.
Okay, so you get to see all this really cool technology and how you might apply it to old problems. If you think about the future of freight, what is a technology or trend that you're most excited about? Or maybe it's like a big hurdle that you think the industry is going to have to, they still need to overcome this.
I think they're one of the same in my answer.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm excited about automation becoming less intimidating and more widely adopted. When we were a brokerage, we were a digital brokerage, and I had come from a traditional brokerage. And so when I first came, the reason I came to Transfix is I was so excited and like invigorated by the way the technology was working. Like it kept people out of mundane tasks
Mm,
and put them closer to the customer. And so as people are there's now companies that kind of help brokerages do that on like on the efficiency and operational side of things and like the actual life cycle of the load. I'm really excited for people to be more open to that and seeing that it's not replacing people, kind of what I was saying earlier, and like freeing
yeah.
them up to focus on more of that high value work. Again, this is one of the same and kind of going back to what I said before. I think the biggest hurdles is isn't the technology. The technology is brilliant, but it's adoption of it. You can
Mm,
build the smartest, most accurate tools in the world, but if you don't have people or processes in place to support it, it doesn't stick. It doesn't work.
yeah.
And
We're like, preach.
um yeah. And and it's interesting because, like, it it's funny because adoption starts with leadership, and
Mm,
leadership is usually the ones that are signing off for you to take on an additional cost in your P&L to drive these efficiencies. But leadership is the one that needs to align, these brokerages or these companies around what the expected outcomes of the tool are. What does success look like? How does it align into the company's strategy, and why it matters to the business, not just short term, but long term. Um, and so I think when you give your teams clarity on how to leverage the tool in their day to day, and then you reinforce that adoption, that's where you see the results, and that's where you see it's critical. When adoption is framed in terms of like this is how we make your job easier, as opposed to this is another system that you have to use. You have to be in it 10 times a day, and I'm going to record every time you click a button inside of it. Like that's not going to work, right? That you don't see
uh,
cultural shifts happen by that type of management. You see them happen by understanding like, oh, okay, this enables me to better perform and, to maybe move my career ladder or whatever that may be. That's when the type of technology stops becoming something shiny and actually starts becoming part of the core to how a company operates.
A follow up. How educated does a leadership need or deep into the technology or system to be able to? Because I think we struggle with like, we need to know enough to be, because you are signing the
Hmm.
checks, but then how deep should they be able to go? Or is there what have you seen be more successful when it comes to that? When are they like need to be immersed in it to really be leading the organization through it? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I think it depends on a couple of things. I think it depends on how well the leader communicates to the team the tool and the, like, KPIs that they wanna see out of the tool. I've also seen it in another way where we've had leadership that have been on weekly calls, but they're not engaged, and so it
Yeah.
doesn't help drive the adoption. I've seen it where leadership is not on weekly calls, but the team is very clear about how they wanna leverage the tool. And so their individual level of engagement, I think, in the tool itself is not necessary. It's their vision and the outcome that they wanna see from the tool and how well that's communicated to the team.
Okay.
And if Bob's bonus or Bob's performance review is based on, implementation of the tool, that's going to matter to Bob. But Bob's got to know kind of what the clear vision is from his leader as to what success looks like and what does implementation is such a broad term, right? Success is such a broad
Mhm.
term. You really need to kind of get into the
Mhm.
nitty gritty of what that looks like so that you know kind of how to manage up also in those situations.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful.
Sure.
Okay, as you think about your experience managing a business development team responsible for millions in revenue,
Okay.
what's the one non-technical skill you believe is most crucial for a successful sales leader in the logistics space today?
Hands down, listening. It's so
Mm,
critical. Um, I don't think it's about, I don't think you necessarily need to know every single feature of your product. And I've done it. I've coached around it. I catch myself still sometimes. Like you're so excited about the product that you just want to like jump in and you want to start pitching and you want to like tell people, like I always tell my team, like, you should be evangelical about this, but to a point where don't let it, derail your pitch because you stopped listening to the customer. I think most effective leaders and sales reps know how to listen deeply to what customers are really saying. Um, and for me, that means not just hearing words, but framing follow up questions around what I've heard. So if a customer says, we're struggling with margin compression, instead of responding with, oh, let me show you in our tool where you can see what your margin looks like, it's more so around asking more questions and listening to what drives that. So like what's driving that compression? Is it carrier rates, customer rates, expectations, internal processes? That gives me a window into the world that helps me make the solution more relevant, or not always best case scenario, but for me to understand that I can't solve their problem, which
yeah.
is often can be more help too, instead of taking them down a rabbit hole of a
Mm,
demos and then realizing we're actually not a good fit. Um, I think also I've done some training around it and I found value in another piece of listening is the value of the powerful pause. Sometimes silence after a question is the most effective tool that you have. People naturally want to fill space and they often want to share like something immediately. But when you give somebody a few minutes or like 30 seconds after what they've said to kind of think through it, they can they can fill that time with some stuff that's really insightful that maybe they were holding back. And when you combine your active listening, which can, help lead to your thoughtful questioning, it makes customers feel heard. Um, and understood. And so I think, everyone talks about it. It's not a secret. Like in sales, you want to build trust. And that can hopefully net you long-term relationships. And those are things that I've really relied on and coach with my teams is just making sure you're listening and you're thoughtful, um, and you're not trying to fill a void with noise.
mm.
So many good takeaways there. Active listening is something I still continue to work on.
Katie and I both are not great at that. We're on a journey. As you see, we're like talking over each other. We're like, yeah, yeah. Like we're yeah,
Yeah, and it's hard too from a sales standpoint. Like I said early on, like I think I was a personality hire at Crowley initially. Like I like to be like energetic and engaging and like I don't mind controlling a room. I don't mind going in front of a large audience. Like these are areas where I thrive. And so it's been a journey for me too to not want to fill that void or like really kind of listen because oftentimes I'm only listening to a point where I'm like, okay, now it's my turn to speak. I'm
hmm
ready. So it's a journey.
I'm gonna practice the thoughtful pause going into this week.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a
Okay,
good one.
so you have had so many really wonderful experiences. We'd like to take a moment to think back.
Mhm.
When was the time that you either stumbled or, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that as a leader. But in hindsight now, it's turned out to be like a really, really wonderful teaching moment. And if there's a funny anecdote in there too, we always appreciate those.
Yeah, I mean, I have made more mistakes than I could but then we would ever have time to really dish out on here. I'm definitely the first to say, "Ooh, I that was not a good call. I messed up there, what that looks like." I mean, ear early on, I think I've just made silly ones where I always joke that there's a difference between being confident and being cocky. And when I had first come into trucking, I had been in land transportation and propane distribution and like all these other parts of what Crowley did, more focused on the other side of transportation. And really, like brokerage was the last piece that I got into. But when given the opportunity to, when they said, "Hey, Carly, do you want to sell in brokerage?" I was like, "Oh, yes, I could totally do this. I mean, I know everything else. Why couldn't I?" In and of itself, that was a massive, like, humbling moment because brokers are not soft. Like, the people in the logistics space, they don't care about your feelings, and so it's really easy to get humbled. I like, one in particular, when I first went into the transition, I was making cold calls, and cold calling at Crowley was a bit easier in that you could be like, "Hey, you work with us on the ocean side. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your domestic. Like, we're already a vendor. We're already set up." The first call I ever made was, I actually still talk to this gentleman today because we get a laugh out of it, but it was a cold call, to a large shoe retailer, and, I'm pitching him on Crowley and all the great things, and he bites. And so in brokerage, just some context, in brokerage, it's a 53 dry van. Like, typically, when you're talking about a dry van load, there's not sizes like there are in ocean containers, but I'd only worked in ocean. So I was like, "Great, Tuesday, it's this point to this destination. Like, do you want, like, how much product are we talking about? You want like a 20, a 45, a 40? Like, what size trailer do you want?" And he was like, "Oh, sweetie, you had me till now." And I was like, "What? What happened?" And, he kind of laughed and joked around. He was like, trucking is just 53. That's what we loaded it. Like, there's no other way around it. But it was a difference between being cocky and confident, right? I went into it thinking I knew this. I didn't need anyone's help. My manager was on sales calls for the week. He was like, "You should talk to these people." I was like, "I don't need to talk to them. I got this." So I've made like really, really silly mistakes like that. I don't know. I also move really fast. And so I'm a terrible typist. Like, I move really fast, and half the time, like, you can't actually read what I'm sending to a group, and then they'll come back to me and be like, "What are we doing, Carly?" And I'm like, "Oh, you wanna read that? That's helpful." But I don't know, there's more, I'm sure millions more that I've made, but I think, fortunately, no one holds back in constructive criticism in the space that we're working in, so they keep you humble pretty quickly.
It's good
Did you
learnings, it's
feel
good
it?
bounce back. Oh, go ahead.
Mhm.
I was gonna say, like, do you feel like that was that a hit to your confidence? You were kind of like, okay, I made a mistake. I'm gonna, because I
That's funny,
think
this is where I was
sometimes,
gonna go with
especially
this, yeah.
early in career, I know maybe I'm like an over processor where like I will be like, oh my gosh, and then I bring it up to someone else. They're like, we completely forgot about that. No one cared but you. But
Y I would say I was like that up until maybe in the last few years. In that moment, like, when I said the wrong one, fortunately, the guy on the call kind of joked, and you know, he was like, "All right, now that you got it, are you sure you're gonna show up with the right truck?" and all that stuff, and
yeah,
and I made it a joke afterwards, where I'd be like, "Okay, your flatbed's showing up," and he was like, "Carly," and I was like, "Just kidding." And so I think I did, like, especially in my time in Crowley when I wasn't as confident and I was trying to just figure stuff out, like, so desperate to move up the ladder and learn as much as I could. I did internalize a lot of it and was like, "Oh my gosh, that was the worst. They're never gonna forget that. What does that look like?" Um, I definitely did. I would probably say, and I don't know if this is just comes from experience and age and motherhood and context into, like, what's important and what's not. I feel like these days a lot less gets to me than it used to. Like, if I screw up, I'm the first to say, "This was on me." Like, I have no problem. I'm really big in taking ownership. It's a really big thing that we we teach our kids, and so you can't teach your kids to take ownership if you don't do it in front of them and in front of your employees. So I don't mind owning up when I've screwed up.
It's the
Thank you for
hallmark of a good
sharing.
leader. It is.
All right. I think that was all of our questions for today, Carly.
So it's
Awesome.
so good to meet you and hear all these fun stories too.
Yeah,
I know. I
likewise.
learned
This
so
is
much today. I'm like, I always have my little notepad of notes, so you'll see you'll see your quotes coming through.
great.
Thank
Yeah.
you. No, this was really amazing, and it was so good to meet you.
It was really great to meet both of you. Thank you for the platform to kind of share more about Transfix and our journey, and my personal journey. I really enjoyed it.